It was early June, and my friend Jake and I had driven down to Yellowstone National Park for a weekend camping trip. The north entrance was only about 3 hours from where we lived in Billings, Montana. We picked a pretty secluded spot away from the main campsites. I'd say it was about a half-mile hike off the main trail. That first night, Friday night, was totally normal. We set up the tent, got a fire going, cooked up some food, and just got used to our surroundings. Around midnight, we crawled into the tent and crashed hard. I woke up at like 3 a.m. needing to pee. Always happens to me. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into the woods to do my business. That's when I heard something big moving around out there beyond our sight. I froze and strained my eyes, but it was hard to see much in the darkness, with just the faint moonlight filtering through the trees. After a few seconds, I could make out something massive, maybe 8 or 9 feet tall, walking upright just 30 yards away. It seemed to be sniffing the air. I stood there motionless, not making a sound, just watching this huge creature lumbering around. My heart was pounding out of my chest. Then it turned its head, and I could make out 2 bright eyes reflecting the moonlight, staring right at me. That's when I realized this thing knew I was there. It took a few steps towards me, still sniffing. I could hear its heavy footsteps crunching on the leaves and undergrowth. My mind was racing. What the hell was this thing? A bear, maybe? No. It was way too tall and walked upright. Some forest rangers in a ghillie suit messing with campers. But it moved all wrong, almost ape-like. Just then, Jake unzipped the tent and Whisper yelled, "Dude, what's taking so long?" The creature immediately turned and looked right at the tent where the sound came from. It let out this crazy growling roar that I'll never forget. Jake shouted, "Holy crap," from inside the tent. And that's the moment when the creature started running straight towards us. That massive creature charged right towards our tent, covering the 30 yards in just a few huge strides. Jake was screaming from inside the tent as it barreled down on us. I had no idea what to do. My mind went totally blank with fear. Part of me thought I should try to fight this thing off, but it was incredibly large and powerful looking. Another part of me wanted to just run, but I knew that tent was our only real shelter. When the creature was maybe 10 yards away, it reared up on its hind legs, throwing its head back. It unleashed another earth-shaking roar that seemed to go on forever. I'll never forget the sight of its silhouette against the night sky, easily 9 feet tall, thick arms raising up. That's when I noticed the stench. A thick, rotting smell like decaying meat overwhelmed me, and I had to fight back vomiting. The roar finally stopped, and the creature dropped back down on all fours. For a moment, everything was deathly silent and still. Jake had gone quiet inside the tent. Then the creature started sidling up towards the tent, shoulders hunched, almost like it was stalking prey. I could make out its form a bit better now that it was closer. Massive, rounded shoulders, like a silverback gorilla but far bigger. A thick snout with wicked teeth bared, and those eyes, still glowing in the dark, locked right on the tent. It pulled up a few feet from the tent, and I could sense it was getting ready to attack. I braced myself with the large branch gripped tightly in both hands. In one explosive motion, the thing pounced, swiping a giant paw towards the roof of our tent with tremendous force. There was a deafening ripping sound as its claws sliced clean through the tent fabric. Jake let out a blood-curdling scream as part of the tent collapsed inwards from the impact. I saw his legs and sleeping bag get violently thrown aside as the creature's paw entered the tent. Not knowing what else to do, I charged at the thing while its arm was still inside the compromised tent. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I swung the heavy branch like a baseball bat, making direct contact with the back of the creature's arm. It yanked its arm out of the tent immediately, turning its glowing eyes towards me. A deep, gurgling growl rumbled from its throat as it began stalking in my direction, hunched over on all fours. Broken tent poles and shredded fabric were scattered everywhere. Suddenly, Jake burst out of the remains of the tent, clutching a camping hatchet. "Get away from him!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. The creature's head whipped around, startled by Jake's voice. Taking advantage of the split-second distraction, I swung the branch again. whacking the side of the thing's head with every ounce of force I could muster. It staggered sideways a few steps, letting out a piercing yelp. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it would retreat, but then it steadied itself, and its haunting glowing eyes fixed on us again with an absolutely primal, merciless look. That's when we heard crashing sounds in the distance, like several other large animals were approaching our position at a dead run. The crashing sounds grew rapidly louder, like a herd of elephants charging through the forest. Suddenly, bright lights began piercing through the trees, large, powerful flashlight beams sweeping back and forth. "You boys need to get out of here right now," a deep voice shouted from the darkness. "We've got this situation contained, but it's not safe." A group of 5 or 6 armed rangers emerged from the tree line, lights probing the area around our demolished campsite. The creature snarled and faced them defensively on its hind legs. One of the rangers shouted something into his radio, and seconds later, a deafening pulse of sound ripped through the air. It was some kind of high-pitched sonic weapon that caused the massive cryptid to buckle and shriek in pain, dropping to all fours. The rangers immediately opened fire on the thing with tranquilizer darts, rapidly firing several rounds that impacted its huge body one after another. It charged a few yards before stumbling and crashing to the ground, darts protruding from its back and thick neck. "Don't move! We're coming to get you!" another ranger called out as the team cautiously approached, rifles still trained on the now motionless creature. 2 rangers reached us and quickly ushered us away from the scene to safety, while the others secured the cryptid with restraints and a body bag for transportation. We were rushed to the Rangers' mobile command center and thoroughly checked over, though miraculously we only had minor cuts and bruises from the tent destruction. After giving statements about our bizarre encounter, we were driven to our vehicle and asked to leave the park, saying that it was for our own safety, but who really knows? They were probably just trying to get us out of there so we didn't see anything else. To this day, we have no idea what that thing was or where the Rangers took it. The official report from Yellowstone lists our incident as simply an animal attack, but Jake and I know we experienced something much stranger and more unexplainable that night out in those woods. This next story comes to us only in bits and pieces. It's rather vague, but I found it interesting enough to share. I've been trying to fill in some of the blanks, but here is all I know for now. Basically, this story is pieced together from fragmented accounts and unverifiable sources, but it challenges our understanding of the natural world and the depths of official knowledge. Let me know if you've heard anything about this, or if you have any additional information. About 5 years ago, a research team, funded by a private institution, ventured into the heart of a national forest region in the Pacific Northwest. Their official mission was to conduct a broad ecological survey, but rumors suggest they were searching for something far more specific. The team was equipped with cutting-edge technology, much of which was said to be experimental and not yet available to the public. As their expedition progressed deeper into the wilderness, team members began to report unusual occurrences. Strange sounds echoed through the forest at night. Unlike any known wildlife, their equipment malfunctioned in inexplicable ways, particularly when they entered certain areas. Most intriguingly, they found traces of an unclassified biological presence, neither plant nor any known animal. In a secluded valley, hidden from satellite imagery by dense canopy cover, the team reportedly made a groundbreaking discovery. The exact nature of this find remains shrouded in mystery, but it was significant enough to cause immediate concern among the highest levels of the research institution. Shortly after the team reported their findings, all communication with them abruptly ceased. When contact was re-established weeks later, the team members provided only vague, conflicting accounts of their experiences. They spoke of memory gaps and a sudden change in their research focus, with no mention of their earlier reports. Unconfirmed reports suggest that an unidentified government agency became involved at this point. Witnesses in nearby areas described unusual activity, including increased air traffic and the arrival of unmarked vehicles. In the months and years that followed, a series of curious events unfolded. 1. The research institution that funded the expedition underwent a complete restructuring, with many key personnel leaving or being reassigned. 2. Several team members reportedly experienced unexplained health issues and sudden career changes. 3. Attempts by independent researchers and journalists to access the expedition area were consistently thwarted by a combination of legal obstacles and unexplained circumstances. 4. Unusual patterns of wildlife behavior were noted in regions surrounding the expedition area, though no official studies were ever published. 5. Locals reported increased government presence in the area, though the purpose was never officially disclosed. As time passed, the events surrounding the expedition faded from public attention. However, in certain circles, discussions continue. Theories abound, ranging from the discovery of unknown species to more fantastical explanations involving paranormal phenomena or extraterrestrial involvement. Occasionally, fragments of information surface: an overheard conversation, a redacted document, a cryptic message. These pieces tantalize with the possibility of revelation, but never provide concrete answers. The true nature of what was discovered in that remote wilderness remains unknown. The lack of verifiable information has only fueled speculation and debate. Some dismiss the entire affair as an elaborate hoax or a misinterpretation of natural phenomena. Others see it as evidence of hidden knowledge, carefully guarded by those in power. What cannot be denied is the impact this story has had on those who encounter it. It serves as a reminder that our world still holds mysteries, that the boundaries of our knowledge are not as fixed as we might believe, and that in the shadows of our civilized world, there may still be wonders or terrors waiting to be discovered. As the years pass, the wilderness keeps its secrets, but for those who listen closely, the whispers continue, hinting at truths just beyond our grasp, challenging us to question what we think we know about the world around us. I recently heard from a woman named Gloria, who lives on a sprawling farm out in the quiet countryside near Topeka, Kansas. From the first moment of our contact, I could tell she was a tough, practical person, the kind of woman who knows her way around a farm. She gave off a sense of resilience that comes from years of hard work. Yet, as we emailed back and forth, I noticed her starting to relax and really express herself to me, a stark contrast to her rugged exterior. She seemed genuinely rattled by what happened, and as she began to share her story, I understood why. Gloria has lived on her family's farm her entire life. Amazingly, she lives there alone and has shared with me that she's a bit of a loner and thought of as strange by neighbors. She knows every sound her house makes, every rustle that comes from the fields around her. At night, the area around her farmhouse falls into complete silence, broken only by the wind in the tall corn stalks or the distant howl of a coyote. It's an existence that she has cherished and has never felt lonely. But lately, her peace has been shattered. It all began a couple of months ago. Gloria was jolted awake in the middle of the night by an eerie, high-pitched whine. It was strange for the area, sharp and metallic, yet steady. Her heart raced as she shot up and sat listening for more. After about 10 minutes, she mustered the courage to slip out of bed and creep toward the kitchen window, which was just down the hall from her bedroom, on the first floor. Peering out into the yard, she was met with a sight that would haunt her for weeks to come. A bright, pulsating light hovered over the field behind her house. It was not the warm glow of a car headlight or the soft illumination of a street lamp. This light was big, round, and almost blinding her from the sky. It pulsed slowly as if it were breathing, casting a strange green hue across the farm. Gloria felt an inexplicable pull towards it, which terrified her. As she watched, the light transformed from a mere presence into something more active. Without warning, a thin white beam shot down from its center, slicing through the darkness and scanning back and forth across the field. It moved deliberately, methodically, as if searching for something or someone. Gloria stopped breathing and only took a gasp of air after nearly a minute, She then felt the instinct to run back to her room and shut the door, yet she was unable to look away. What was this thing? Thousands of questions raced through her mind as she stood there trembling. She estimated that she watched for about 30 minutes, the fear pulsing through her veins and making her sweat. Eventually, the object took off just as suddenly as it had appeared. The light shot straight up into the sky, disappearing without a trace. That night, sleep was impossible no matter how hard she tried. Her heart was still pounding. She sat in her kitchen, which felt like the walls were closing in around her, trying to process what she had witnessed. The familiar sounds of her home felt uncomfortable now. She had nowhere to escape to. In the days that followed, Gloria found herself on edge. The encounters didn't stop. They repeated almost monthly, always following the same eerie pattern: the high-pitched whine, the bright light, and the scanning beam. Each time, she felt the same mix of fear and curiosity. She tried to tell friends and neighbors about her experiences, but to them, she was just the crazy lady down the street. As if the waking encounters weren't enough, Gloria began experiencing vivid nightmares. In her dreams, the bright light returned, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of foreboding. She dreamt of the field, but it was transformed, darker, filled with strange, twisted plants that seemed to move on their own. Shadows danced at the corners of her vision, and she would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling as if something was watching her, lurking just beyond the edge of her consciousness. During the day, the field that had once been a source of pride and solace now filled her with dread. She found herself avoiding it, her heart racing at the thought of stepping outside. The familiar landscape had become a source of anxiety, and she constantly looked over her shoulder, half expecting to see that blinding light reappear. Concerned for her well-being, I suggested that she keep a journal to document her experiences. Writing down every detail of what she saw and felt might help her make sense of the chaos. At first, she hesitated, unsure if it would do any good. But after a moment of reflection, she agreed, realizing that perhaps putting her thoughts on paper could provide some clarity. As we wrapped up our conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that Gloria's story was just the tip of the iceberg. There had to be more to her experiences. I promised to stay in touch and encouraged her to reach out if anything new happened. Gloria's unsettling experiences are not just an isolated incident. They resonate with many other people who have seen things in rural Kansas over the years. From UFO sightings to strange weather patterns, the region has its share of mysteries. Perhaps Gloria's encounters are part of a larger series of events that have yet to be fully understood. Maybe they won't even fully unfold for decades or even centuries. There was definitely something going on out there, something that defied explanation. I knew I had to share this strange case, not just for Gloria's sake, but to uncover the truth behind the light in the Kansas sky. Whatever was happening, it was clear that Gloria was caught in the middle and needs help. Maybe some of you can help her not feel so crazy before the next sighting occurs. The oppressive heat of the Florida summer clung to my skin like a damp cloth as I made my way through the dense undergrowth of the Everglades. It was late afternoon and the sun was beginning to set across the swampy terrain. I had been planning this expedition for months, meticulously researching local legends and gathering equipment for what I hoped would be a groundbreaking encounter with the elusive creature of legends, the skunk ape, Florida's own version of Bigfoot. My fascination with cryptids had begun years earlier, sparked by a chance encounter with an old-timer at a gas station. His weathered face had crinkled with a mixture of fear and excitement as he told me about his own brush with the creature some 40 years prior. Since then, I had become obsessed, spending countless hours poring over photographs and interviewing anyone who claimed to have seen the beast. As I pushed deeper into the swamp, the sounds of wildlife surrounded me, the croaking of frogs, the buzz of insects, and the occasional splash of something unseen breaking the water's surface. I checked my GPS, confirming that I was nearing the coordinates where the most recent sighting had occurred. According to my source, a local fisherman had spotted a large hair-covered bipedal creature lumbering through this very area just 2 weeks ago. The light was fading fast now, and I knew I needed to set up camp soon. I found a small clearing, slightly elevated from the surrounding wetlands, and began to unpack my gear. With my tent erected and a small smokeless camp stove heating up a can of beans, I settled in for the night. I pulled out my journal and began to document the day's journey, occasionally pausing to scan the tree line. Hours passed and the night grew deeper. The sounds of the swamp had changed, becoming more subdued. It was nearing midnight when I first heard it, a low sound that was neither fully human nor entirely animal. My heart raced as I fumbled for my audio recorder, desperate to capture any evidence of the creature's presence. The sound came again, closer this time. It was a sort of whooping call, followed by what could only be described as wood knocking. I had read about this behavior in Bigfoot reports from the Pacific Northwest, but hearing it firsthand was totally surreal. Slowly, I unzipped my tent and peered out into the blackness. At first, I saw nothing but shadows and the faint outline of trees against the sky. Then, movement caught my eye. Something large was moving through the underbrush about 50 yards from my campsite. I reached for my camera, hands shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. As I raised the viewfinder to my eye, I caught a glimpse of a massive, hair-covered form stepping into a patch of moonlight. The creature was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long, powerful arms. Its face was partially obscured by the shadows, but I could make out a pronounced brow ridge and deep-set eyes that seemed to glow in a way that was terrifying. The creature paused, lifting its head as if scenting the air. Time seemed to stand still. I was acutely aware of my own vulnerability, alone in the wilderness with this creature. Yet, I felt no immediate threat. The spell was broken by a sudden burst of noise from the swamp, perhaps an alligator catching its prey. The creature's head whipped around towards the sound, and in that instant of distraction, it melted back into the shadows of the swamp. Without thinking, I whistled after it, hoping it might return to investigate my noise. For the remainder of the night, I sat vigil at the entrance of my tent, straining my eyes and ears for any sign of the creature's return. But there was no sign of it again that night. The following days were a blur of activity. I scoured the area for physical evidence, footprints, hair samples, anything that could confirm my sighting. I found a few promising impressions in the soft mud near the water's edge, but the swamp had a way of quickly erasing evidence. A tuft of coarse, reddish-brown hair snagged on a low-hanging branch gave me hope, though I knew it could just as easily have come from any other swamp creature. Eventually, I packed up my campsite and prepared to return to civilization. I felt a profound sense of happiness. I had achieved my goal of encountering the skunk ape, yet I knew that my experience would likely be met with skepticism. Without concrete evidence, my sighting would be torn apart by those who don't want to believe. As I emerged from the swamp, covered in mud and mosquito bites, but filled with a sense of wonder, I knew that this was only the beginning. My encounter with what I am sure was the skunk ape had just given me more energy to continue my search in hopes of a future sighting. In the months that followed, I threw myself into learning more about the creature. My encounter had ignited a passion for exploration and discovery that I never knew I possessed. As I planned my next trip into the Everglades, I can't stop myself from feeling the excitement of a kid at Christmas, looking forward to what I might find.